depends. I mean, there are definitely a handful at all clubs of girls who know what's going on. Like, I think we're doing a pretty fun job of creating interesting media. Like, we have great meme groups, and we have the dancer locker room, and we have dancers resource, and we have people like Jack the Stripper out there, like, making fun content and all kinds of like cool ways that we are framing the narrative and talking about what's going on in a way that has never previously been accessible to dancers.
Right.
So some people are, are experiencing that. They're picking up that media and they're coming in with that kind of under their belt, like as tools that they have. But a lot of girls are not. It's still, as much as ever before, it's been a thing where, we have like tiers of dancers being aware of things. Like, there's people who didn't really have much of a choice in the situation who are coming because they have, desperate situations, or they just, they don't know where else they can work.
Yeah.
So there's that level. Then there's people who do know what they're getting into and are willing to do it, and they're fine with that, but they're not trying to make moves. There is like the kind of educated class of strippers who, they know what's up. They're pursuing other things at the same time, and they are down for whatever causes. And there's just like older strippers who have different experiences, and they've seen the decline of clubs, and they have their own weight in with it. And maybe, I think there's also like a lot of pressure to stay where you are if you're an older stripper, because, it's a hard climate right now.
This is who's going to hire me.
Yeah, who's going to hire
40 years old.
Who's going to hire you at 40 years old, or who's going to hire me with all my tattoos, or who's going to hire me with what this and that, my short hair.
Right.
So there's always going to be such a diversity of people in the club.
Sure. Well, it sounds like what you're saying is that strippers are people.
Yes, we're not a monolith.
Nice.
Yeah. I know, it's surprising.
Yeah, I know. Have you seen the Hustlers movie yet?
Yeah.
You did? Mm-hmm. I've been avoiding it.
Yeah, really?
I need to see it. Well, because there was this one, I was listening to this one review on this NPR show, and they were talking about this dressing room strip club scene, and they were just talking about how interesting it was, how the dancers at the end of the night were like taking off their shoes and talking about how like what they were going to do when they got home after work. And I was so irritated by that dialogue.
They think that they just roll us into a carpet and stick us in the closet at the end of the night. I always joke with clients that way. They're like, oh, where are you going after this? I'm like, oh, back to the closet where they keep me.
That's amazing. I would get, they would say, oh, what do you do during the day? I'm like, oh, I get my nails done and I go tanning and, I sleep in and, because they it's almost like that's all we do.
They think that you're just like a princess kind of.
Yeah. Like all I do is like just
prepare and
wake up and prepare all day.
And get beautiful all day.
Yeah, that's all I do.
It's so funny.
Yeah, well, meanwhile, it's the opposite. We do a million amazing different things. So speaking of that, I was on your show, Heaux and the Kneaux, with my partner, Antonia Crane.
Yes.
And had such a fun time with you guys,
it was
you and
very
your sister,
fun.
Clover. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your podcasts and some of the topics that you discuss?
Yeah. So Heaux and the Kneaux is a podcast about sex work by sex workers for sex workers. And we talk to sex workers across all different disciplines. So it could be people who are pro-doms and people making porn, cammers, strippers, cuddlers, massage parlor workers, full service escorts, street-based sex workers, everybody.
I really love this list you just rattled off. Can you write that list down for me one day?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I get asked a lot, what classifies a sex worker. And so I'd like to ask you that question. Like, obviously you have this list and a lot of people wouldn't consider strippers sex workers, not even strippers themselves.
Definitely. I think that's a big division line with a lot of strippers is they don't want to be considered sex workers because they're not providing full service. But I mean, we are definitely sex workers.
Yeah. I looked up the definition of sex worker. I was looking on Wikipedia where everything on there is true.
Mm-hmm.
And
awesome. The real beacon of knowledge.
And one of the things that it mentioned on there, and I want to go back and read it again, and I want to research this a little bit more, but it was mentioning that even the people who work in the facility of where the sex work is provided are also considered sex workers.
Very interesting. Mm-hmm. But I think I kind of get it, because there is this real, especially you see in the stripper world, because it's like one of the few forms of legal sex work, that the people who work in strip clubs also carry a lot of the stigma. Like they don't have as much ease and changing jobs, you know, like, they tend to stay within strip clubs.
Yeah, you're right.
There's like a secrecy around what they tell their families and things like that. Like they have a lot of the kind of secrecy that we have to bear. Of course, they're not doing like the same levels, and like with all sex work, there are degrees, you know,
right?
Like taking erotic nudes and making softcore porn is not the same as like being a straight-based sex worker,
right,
who does full service. Like,
right,
we can't just, you know, it's not the same thing, it's not the same tier, but it is under it's under the umbrella.
Totally. So are those the types of things that you discuss on your show, like the different tiers and types of sex work? And
totally. So it's that we talk about life, labor, politics, the really nitty gritty of like what your workplace looks like. What is your office if you're a sex worker? Because that's kind of how I've been calling the strip club lately.
The office. I mean, that's where we conduct all of our business.
Exactly. It's my place of business.
Yeah.
And we also take a dip back and talk about history. All of our historical sex workers, our historical Heaux, as we call them. Mm-hmm. Which is also kind of funny, because I had a guest recently, a male porn star, who was like, I don't know if I want to be called a Heaux. Like, I don't know if I'm like a Heaux. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, what about like man whore or things like that? It's like, okay, well, if you add the man in there, then it works for me.
Oh, really?
I know, you had to add a little like gendered caveat for him.
Oh, because just being a regular whore, it was like too much for him?
It was too gendered a term. He felt it was conflated with the feminine whore, and he didn't want to be under that umbrella.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I mean, I contest this for sure. I don't think that we should be dividing each other in that way as well, especially whore to whore, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, I consider myself to be a historical Heaux. I think what's important about my show is giving historical significance to people who are historically significant. I think that we don't have a cultivated history in the same way that a lot of other professions do. And I think that it's important to talk about it and to create an archive of our experiences and talk about our work, and kind of like, you know, we can have like a kind of database understanding of this is sex work. Yeah. The big umbrella that we all hang out under.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So who's your favorite historical Heaux?
Oh, that's hard.
Really?
I guess I'm gonna go for an easy one because it's off the top of my head. But Clover recently did a historical Heaux segment on Air Force Amy. Are you familiar with her?
No, I'm not.
So she's like a full service sex worker, and she lives out in Vegas, and she kind of like is like more of a madam / house mom of this brothel out there, and she's just like super cool. Like, she started off, did like military service for a while, and then came back and wasn't sure what she wanted to do, and decided to get into sex work, and now she like mentors younger full service sex workers and stuff like that, and she's just like really cool. I wish you should check out the episode on that.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah. So how can people find out more about your podcast?
You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, at Heaux in the Kneaux. So HEAUX in the KNEAUX.
Cool. And we'll have that information definitely like listed for you properly with a link to it for sure. Yeah. I love that, because you're right. Our history is sort of, it's non-existent, and very little has been documented because people are like afraid to talk about us. I don't know. Like, you know,
and I think especially with contemporary sex workers too, because older ones you can kind of get like the history rundown of them. But of course, like a lot of the knowledge that we have about sex workers from the past is like carceral knowledge. So write-ups from their prison record or things like that, like when they've been detained, when they've been tried for whatnot. Like it's interesting how they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But Horse of Yore, if you're not familiar, is a great like resource for learning about all kinds of sex workers across history. They have a fantastic timeline that I
need to read that.
Very thoroughly read through all the time. I'm like, oh, I need a historical hoe. Like, let me just read through this timeline and pick somebody out from it.